welcome back to another round of Tuesday Night Legacy. Tonight we've got Bug Scam versus Stifle Shadow. On the left we have Max playing a Bug Scam list. Now this is basically just using all of the best tempo stuff in the format. Grief has seen a massive uptick in use in Legacy. Being able to reanimate that back into play on turn 1, getting 2 cards out of your opponent's hand is pretty good. With the printing of all this Lord of the Rings stuff, gotta add those Bowmasters. Also trying out 2 Troll of Khazad-dûn to be able to get that swamp cycling, and I'm pretty sure that's it. I mean, you could reanimate it 6/5 with Mega Menace. Could be good. I'm not sure. Everything else in this deck is pretty straightforward. It's either controlling the board, or it's hating out your opponent, taking stuff out of their hand, or just having really good stuff for value. I mean, you got Baleful Strix, and of course the Griefs, the Leovold, and if all else fails, you can always lean back on escaping an Uro in super late game to ride you to victory. And on the right, we have Andrew playing his absolute favorite card, Stifle, in a deck that he's built around. Well, that's not true. It just kind of is able to be back in the format. The Death Shadow list. Now, this is a Grixis build, if I'm not mistaken. No, I totally am. This is a blue-black build of this deck, which is, of course, using the Orcish Bowmaster because it is in black and everyone is using this card. But it's a good old Delver of Secrets strategy. So it's got a couple of these. You're trying to play that tempo. Make sure that you're ahead of your opponent by about 1 turn and end the game either with this flying 3/2, or if you have low life totals, then you can just crash in with the Death Shadow for 1 mana. This does have 1 reanimate, so if you really need to, you can use a utility reanimate to bring your Death Shadow back into play, or just finish them off with a giant Murktide late game. So an aggro control shell versus a tempo deck. Let's see who's going to take it. All right, players are shuffled up, hands are kept. We are into game 1. Here we go. We have Andrew just starting off with a Underground Sea. Max firing back with an Underground Sea as well. And we're going to see a Grief. This is cast after putting down your land to play around Daze. Grief coming in, being able to take a card from your opponent's hand. Instead, we see Andrew say, no thanks, and uses the Force of Will, pitching a Force of Will to get the Grief. Max goes for his Reanimate, and it gets dazed. That 1 mana that he kept up, no good. And we see Andrew use his own Reanimate to take Grief. This has turned around on Max pretty aggressively, getting rid of that removal spell that Max had in his hand, the Shieldred's Edict, being able to keep that Grief. So Andrew is at 3 cards right now. I think Max is down to 2. This was quite a massive swing of, not energy, resources? Tempo. Andrew just keeping up that tempo, even though it wasn't his turn. And we see an Orcish Bowmasters come down from Max just to get it into play. He's not even trying to play around a Daze or whatever, or a Brainstorm catching Andrew off guard. He just says, get it into play so I can block this Grief. This is actually going to bite Max in the butt right here, having that Orcish Bowmaster come in on Andrew's side, dealing 1 damage to Max's Bowmaster, getting it out of play, leaving him just with the 1/1 army. And Andrew gets a crash in for 3 with that Grief. Max does nothing on that 3rd turn and passes it back to Andrew. So Andrew is just punishing Max now with nothing else to be able to be done. Decides to trade army for army. Just still takes 3 from the Grief. Grief being that 3/2 with Menace. Wow, what a game. I mean, Andrew just super aggressive. That flash there was our camera went out, and so we see Max, he had played an Orcish Bowmaster, destroyed the other Orcish Bowmaster, but then Andrew had a fatal push for that Bowmaster, and now we're on a Brainstorm with Max. Trying to decide here, I think, what he's going to put back on top of his deck. I think we're still in attacks, too. No. So that was just Max's turn. He decides to turn it sideways. He had nothing else to do. So the army turns sideways. Andrew does nothing. Didn't even play his land. Just turned Grief sideways, bringing Max down to 2. Max just fetched here. He's actually at 1 life. Oh, no, he didn't. He cycled the Troll of Khazad-dûm, in order to avoid having to pay any life. Plays that Underground Sea because that is how swamp cycling works. Underground Sea is a swamp, so you can go and get that. Doesn't have to be a basic. And we're seeing a Bowmaster come into play here. A Force of Will is going to catch that Bowmaster, and we're going to go to game 2. Huge tempo swings in that first game. That was incredible. We're seeing Andrew just deploy a Delver of Secrets. Crowd favorite for years and years and years, the 1/1 that becomes a 3/2 just by revealing something off the top of your library. Setting himself up here with the Brainstorm. Brainstorm allowing you to put cards back on top of your library, almost guaranteeing that it's going to flip in upkeep. And there it is. He had it actually on the stack and brainstormed in response, showing that he has a Surgical Extraction in his hands now. Surgical Extraction, get to pay 0 mana, 2 life, to go and find something in your opponent's graveyard. And remove that and every copy of it from the game. So you get to look at your opponent's hand, get to look through their library. It's a pretty good spell, especially if it's like a specific combo strategy. Now, I almost want to give Andrew some guff here because he always tells me that you can't value Surgical your opponent. So I am actually surprised to see him bringing it in against Max, since Max is not a combo deck. I'm not entirely certain what he's trying to Surgical here. But we do know that Max runs Reanimates, so it could be viewed as a... it's kind of almost like a counterspell to a Reanimate, right? Because if they target something with a Reanimate, then you can Surgical it in response. Then it fizzles the Reanimate, and they don't get any value from that. Still feel like that's a value Surgical. But Andrew, go ahead and tell me why I'm wrong. So we see Max doing some brainstorming, some pondering, and then he just passes turn. That Delver of Secrets doing a whole lot of work here. Doing a ponder in second main phase. Always attack first and then do your spells, second main phase. Just in case you want to bluff that you have something to do to save your creatures. So no shuffles with the ponder, but more than likely Andrew didn't like those other 2 cards anyways, and maybe this was the only land. So getting his Watery Grave into play here. And we see a Thoughtseize. So Thoughtseize being able to take any non-land card. Pretty good. You lose 2 life for it, though. Wow. Okay, so Sauron's Ransom, Pernicious Deed, Force of Will, Baleful Strix, and a Brainstorm. That's a lot of value. It's kind of a hard pick. I mean, do you take the Sauron's Ransom because that represents the most advantage? Take the Force of Will to guarantee your spells resolving, and we see a Surgical Extraction taking the Brainstorm. So he's getting a 2-for-1. Really, it's a 1-for-1. He gets to take 1 with his Thoughtseize for the Force of Will, and then he gets to take 1 for his Brainstorm. But he gets rid of all of the Brainstorm, so you could consider that a 3-for-1. Still very much a value Surgical Extraction. Just saying. All right, we're slapping down some Baleful Strixes here. Baleful Strix, very good card. Only 2 in the deck. Baleful Strix coming down. Getting to draw a card. I guess there was a counterspell there. I was looking for some... Oh, it was a Daze on the second Baleful Strix and a Submerge for the first Baleful Strix. Those were both of the Strixes out of Max's deck there. Submerge being able to put a creature on top of its owner's library. And you can cast it for free because Max had a forest. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so Sauron's Ransom, we're seeing resolve here. Sauron's Ransom, kind of like a force of will, or not a force of will, a fact or fiction. And Andrew really baiting Max there, showing 2 Baleful Strixes on top. So Max goes, well, obviously, whatever this face down pile is super good, but I think it was like a Pernicious Deed in a land. So not very much value at all. The 2 birds, a much better value. We're seeing a Fatal Push. I forgot to mention, this isn't quite exactly the same list. Max changes his list every week. And since this was so many weeks ago, he just gave me his newest list. We see Max all the way down to 1 here with this Murktide Regent crashing in. And a Death Shadow is going to be a 7/7 coming into play. Pretty good. So not a whole lot that Max can do here. 2 Pernicious Deeds. I think he's got an Animate Dead in hand. So what can he animate dead here? I don't even know. Because he needs 2 blockers. That looks like a Force of Will, but he can't cast that. Animate dead. There it is. And we're seeing a surgical for whatever the target was. And that's going to put Max down. And Andrew takes it 2-0. Some pretty wild tempo swings in that last game. But, you know, Andrew just was able to outvalue Max, even though the scam deck is kind of designed to get maximum value from its graveyard and from its opponent. So good job by Andrew on that 2-0. Still think it was a value surgical. Thanks for stopping by and checking out the channel. If this is your first time here, consider liking and subscribing and clicking the bell icon to see whenever our videos drop so that you can always stay up to date on all of our content. Big shout out to Collector Legion and Spellhold Games for allowing us to record in their play space. We wouldn't exist as a channel without you, so thank you very much. That's going to do it for us this time. As always, I am Eugene, and this is Tuesday Night Legacy. We'll see you next time.